Well, good morning, all my YouTube friends. Going to do a little maintenance work this morning, fixing to take off on a trip in a couple of weeks. And I've been doing this routine for about 10 years now. And I thought I'd video this for you. So I did some printout here from the service manual about what we need to check, what needs to be greased, what needs to be serviced. And I thought I'd show you how I go about doing this. We might both learn something and show you mistakes I've made along the way. Of course, what we're working on today is a Winnebago, is a 2005 Winnebago on a Workhorse chassis, W24. So this will apply to a lot of motorhomes out there on the road. First what I want to do is, on the W24 series, we got these oil-filled hubs. I think the P30 chassis, you have the grease-filled hubs, like regular cars and stuff would have. So I'm going to show you how we can quickly check the oil on it. Let's see if I can get this done with one hand. If you look closely, see this little cap, you got a little notch. Kind of take an old screwdriver, just get in here and give a little twist here. There you go. Make a lot of noise. And now we can get in here and take a peek. And you can see, I'll make sure you get my light in the right spot for you. Alrighty, so come on, there we go. So there's our minimum line. And you can see the oil is right here. That's the full mark. Of course, if you pull this plug out, then it'll just run out. You get this light. There you go. That light is better. You can see a little bit of oil residue slightly, because that's got a vent in it. This thing has a little hole to vent out pressure in the center when needed. Of course, there's a fill cap too right there, so if you need to add oil. And I did a separate video on how to change oil in these hubs. How to take because actually to do a good job, you really need to remove this cap completely, because there's a gasket in behind there that holds back most of the oil. So you have to take off this cap, cut a notch in that gasket to drain most of the oil out, then you can change it. And I forget how many miles that should be done. I'm sure yours is past due, like most of them. Something like this, it's kind of out of sight, out of mind. So this one is in good shape, and so I'm just gonna put this back on. Of course, all you need is a rubber mallet. I got one right here. So I'll give that a love tap, pop that back on real quick, and I'm gonna go over and do the other side and check it. There's no need to video that. Hello, Francine. Francine's here to help me. And so we're gonna do that, and then I'll come back, we'll start greasing this thing. So you know how I said there's no need for me to video the other side? Well, I think I jinxed myself, because I got over here, popped the cap off the driver's side, and found out I'm actually low on oil. So the next question is, where did it go? So at least you'll get to see what it's like to add some. Easy enough. Just pop that cap off. Now, if I had the hub cap off, I could fill it in through here. But I've got some left over from when I did my brake job. And this is the right stuff, because according to the manual, you want to use this right here, GL5. They warn you, I believe I read somewhere, not to use a synthetic gear lube, because these seals have not been tested for synthetic use. The seals, these are called Stemco seals, kind of a unique type of seal system on these front hubs. It takes kind of a special process to install these things. So if you ever have a leak on these front hubs, and don't let them just go in there and put in a standard seal. Sometimes people have done that and they leak, they'll drive you crazy. You got to go back with the Stemco, because the Stemco seal, it actually seals on like the horizontal surface on the spindle plus the vertical surface on the back of the spindle. So it's almost like two seals in one. It's kind of unique. I'll talk about it in my video where I did the brake job. So let's see if we can get some oil put in here. Oh, get it topped off. All right. I'm gonna let that sit for a minute, because sometimes it can be a little slow as it flows back through the bearing to get into the rear of the hub. So I'm gonna let that sit just for a minute. Well, I'll tell you what, while that's sitting, I'm gonna look on the back side to see if there's any residue. Okay, all right, I'm on the back side. I'm trying to get this camera in a spot where we both see it at the same time. Because right up in there is the hub. If I was leaking any oil, I would have oil residue back inside here. So everything is good and dry. Here's my tone ring for the ABS brakes. my rotor. Of course, you can see I grease it quite a bit. There's a kind of a greasy residue, but that's not from the oil, or not from the oil-filled hubs, because everything is nice and dry. Yeah, can't really see it in the other spot, but here from the under here on the back side. Let me get this light off my head, see if it's better. There we go. So everything looks good and dry back in there. So that's good to know. All right, so let's top this off. See, like I said, you gotta let it sit for a minute or two because it slowly seeps past the outer bearing and gets into the center of the hub. So I'll have to top it off just a little bit more here. And I'll let that sit and come back, check it again. Well, while we're waiting for that to finish filling up that hub, I'll double check it again. I'm going to talk about grease. You may or may not know this, but grease comes in grades. You got grade 1, 1.5, grade number 2. This is that, here's the number, NLGI number 2. This is the grease we want to use on our chassis. Now, like this particular grease here, this is some Walmart grease. You see it is grade 1.5. The lower the number, the thinner the grease. The higher the number, the thicker it is. Just so you know, FYI. And you can see here in our manual, it tells you, you know, on our drive shafts and stuff, we want to use the number 2 grease. So that's what we're doing. Always try to use the right stuff. So I just wanted to point that out to you. Have a big roll of paper towel because we're going to need it. Okay, so first item up for ordering is this pivot point for our brake pedal. Remember, this is a W24. Yours may be different, but I do know pre-2004 they did not have a grease fitting. So if yours does not have a grease fitting, I would suggest adding one, because if that ever seizes up, that's really going to make for a bad day, because you got this big long pin shaft that goes all the way down through here. And if you look closely, behind there, there's a nut. There it is. There's a bolt. So you take that bolt out and you can lift up the shaft. But the problem is, some applications, depending on how the coach is built, so I've got that little metal plate in my way. So if I didn't have a grease fitting, the way I'd have to add one is I'd probably have to come in here and notch this plate out of the way. Then I could get it up to the top. That, you know, gives me about 6 or 7 inches. That would get me enough room to get it up out of the way where I could bore a hole and add a grease fitting. So if you don't have a grease fitting, that might be something you want to do. So let's get the grease gun hooked up and add a few shots of grease to it. All right, let's see if we can get some grease out of this thing here. There it goes. Give it one more squirt. All right. Oh yeah, got a bunch out the top. Look there. All right, so I think that one's done. No problem. Okay, so I'm going to need 2 hands for this. So I set me up a little rig here to hold the camera for me. And one thing I've never done, all these years, I've never have greased these pivot points. There's 2 of them. There's one here and there's another one, well, right there, both the same. It's kind of weird, got a strange little clip on it. So I took it off a while ago. I'm going to take it off again for you. Got a little B screwdriver. Get in there, just like that. You pop it up. And you got to watch because it wants to take off once you get it up and over. All right, now it fell back down in there. Keep my fingers out of the way. All right, there we got it. There. And the first time it took off flying. All right, we got that out of the way. Now, something else. You hear that? You got to be careful. And because that little, you know, what's that called? The electric emergency bypass pump, not a bypass. Well, if you lose your hydraulics, this is electric backup to operate the brakes for you. So anyway, there's a relay right here. Let's point to the relay. Right there's the relay. Oh, come on, camera. Get with me. All right, so there's our relay. Get a little more light on the subject, but you can just unplug it right here. And we get a screwdriver on it. There you go. Unplug that relay so that thing's not coming on when it's not supposed to. As a side note, this crazy thing, a couple months ago, I went in the RV, went to start it. I pushed on the brake, because normally you'll notice in these W24s, you hit the brake pedal before you start it. You'll hear this motor kick on, make that noise. And I released the brake and it just kept running. This relay had stuck. Luckily I knew where it was at, so I quickly came out here and unplugged it. So just something to keep in mind. If it ever happens to you, and I unplugged it, I took the relay apart, cleaned it, put it back together. It hasn't happened since, but that was pretty strange. Just something else to keep in mind. All right, let's get back to this. Looks like they put like a white lithium grease on there. That's probably the grease from the factory, because I don't think I've ever done anything with it. So I'm going to take this loose. I'll clean it up real good and put in some new. What? At least I know that pivot shaft moves pretty well. Squeaking a little bit. But at least you got an idea how well it should operate. If you don't have a grease fitting in yours and it doesn't pivot very well. Where's that squeak coming from? Maybe it's coming from the front shaft. All right, let me get that top piece off also. How can we do that? Get that in camera shot. Okay. So now this is getting tricky. I've got a big bright light here. Try not to get burnt. Let's turn it all the way around like that. Okay. That went. Okay. Got that one off. I don't know if it will come off that shaft or not. This pin. Well, it actually will. Amazing. All right. Now. Okay, so now I got no more squeak. So the squeak must be coming, yeah, it's coming from the brake pedal. All right, so everything's operating nice and smooth. I'm gonna get me a little bit of some brake cleaner, paper towels, clean all these shafts up real good. And then I'll get some grease on the situation. Well, I'm here to tell you that grease is like a bubble gum. It's been on there so old. You gotta figure it's 18 years old, that lithium grease. It's almost like a bubble gum now. And kind of difficult to get off. So instead of, I had some brake cleaner, that really wasn't doing the work. So I took some penetrating oil, sprayed on there, and let it soak, kind of soften up that old hard grease. And I'll get it all wiped off good and clean, put fresh on it. Well, it took a little while. Took a little while to get all that cleaned up, and got me a fresh coat of lithium grease back on there. And if you take yours apart and lose any parts or drop something, you got a wave washer on the bottom, you got your pin, you got like a rubber washer on top. And you got that weird clip that goes on there. So I'll need 2 hands to get that back in position. So we'll get this done, and then we'll get crawl underneath this chassis and do some more work. Alrighty, so all is together and done. I just want to point out, I was talking about that if that relay ever sticks on you, if you ever hear that noise, you hear that noise and it doesn't stop, run out here and unplug this relay, and that'll keep that motor from turning. Like I said before, I had that relay stick on me one time and hasn't stuck no more. So hope that doesn't happen. And while I'm still on this end, let's point out to you, this is our J72 pump. We want to make sure that's full. So it uses just regular ATF transmission fluid. It's full, and I've got a little bit of residue. It's been going on for a while. I got a little bit of a leak somewhere. Not sure where it's at. It may be an O-ring between the plastic and the motor. One of these days I'll take that apart and investigate. Also, we need to check is our power steering fluid. And a lot of people may not know this, but you have a filter in here also that needs to be changed. Maybe I want to think every 40,000 miles, somewhere in that range. So I'm good on oil. But the way you access that filter is you remove this band, and I've got a video on how to change the power steering fluid on your Workhorse. And it tells you step by step what to do, what wrenches to use, and all that stuff. So, and the last thing I guess is, of course, you want to check your brake fluid level, because it's always kind of hard to do in these cloudy things. It works better if you get a bright light in behind it. You can kind of tell better where the oil level is. And as a tip, when you go to fill these up, you got two chambers, but one flows into the other. So it doesn't matter which one you fill into, they both fill the other one up. Alrighty, on to the next. And as you can see, I finally got that full. It took about 3 times adding, letting it sit, adding. So we're where we need to be now. Put the cap back on. And we got that took care of. Okay, so now let's crawl under and work on this front end axle. And when you put these caps back on here, we got these little dimples. Kind of line them up with those little flat spots, because that's the way I found it when I removed it. See the little dimple? See the little bit of this flat spot there? Kind of center them up. Take a rubber mallet, pop them in place, and hopefully it'll stay there and never come off on you. Alright, so we finally made it under the RV. Now you may notice I have the wheels off the ground. And I do that for a particular reason. And first of all, if you're going to bring your wheels up off the ground, you need to be safe about it. Now with the W24, you notice I don't have any jack stands on it at the moment. I should have, and sometimes I do. But I've just got it off the ground. With the W24, it's got so much clearance. Normally I don't have to raise it up. If I just want to crawl in here and do stuff, I don't even need to use the jacks at all. I still have enough room to crawl into here. But for safety's sake, one thing you can do, if you can't afford jack stands, buy you some extra sets of these leveling blocks. I forget the specs, they support a tremendous amount of weight. And so you can just put a big stack of these underneath the axle. And then when you get to the top, just have your board here, a flat board between this piece and the axle. I've done that before when I like winter storage. If we're going to be sitting for a long time, I'll get all the wheels off the ground that way. So, but I'm just going to have this lifted up here just for a few minutes till I get done greasing this thing. Of course, on this end, we're on the passenger side now. We just got 3 fittings we got to deal with. Of course, you want to get them all cleaned up good. But there's a reason why I want these off the ground. I'll point that out till you get these cleaned off. All right, get them shined up. The reason, and I did a drawing, so or print this drawing out so it makes a little bit more sense. Because normally, when the wheels are on the ground, you got a tremendous amount of pressure on our bushings. So you got to figure when this wheel is on the ground, it's pushing up against the spindle. So the spindle's trying to cock sideways against the kingpin. So you got super amount of pressure on this point and super amount of pressure on the bottom point of those two bushings. And that area is where the least amount of grease is going to get to. So if I go to grease it, you got all this pressure here, the grease is not going to get there very well. But if I raise it up off the ground, the opposite takes place. Now that I got it lifted off the ground, it'll rock this way, opening up these gaps. So that way, when I do grease it, I'm going to get grease in there where it's most needed, under those high pressure points. That's my thinking anyway. It doesn't cost me anything to do, so I just raise it up, and it makes it easier to get to, and kind of makes sense to me. Also, what it does, when it gets the weight, normally when the wheels are on the ground, you got the axle weight pressing down on the thrust bearing. So by lifting up off the ground, I've also alleviated that weight and maybe created a bit better gap, allowing grease to flow through areas that it normally would not flow through so easy. So that's my thinking. That's why I do it. Anyways, so let's get a grease gun, throw a few shots of grease on this thing. I'm trying to do the impossible. Grease this with one hand. All right, that's 3 squirts. There it is. It's pushing out the back. I see it there. Get one more for good measure. I don't know, do it a little bit more. See if I can't see some good grease. That's quite a bit. I pumped about 6 shots into it. Got a lot of excess there. Alright, I got the top grease fitting. You see how the red's coming out. Got some good grease. And on the back side, I think you can see, where is it at? Yeah, there it is. I got a bunch of good fresh red grease coming out on it. So I got that good. So now let's get this tie rod. And actually these boots, I remember those boots had split on me in the past, and you can change them out yourself. I can't even remember if I did a video on that or not. It's been so long, I may have. But I had to heat it up, you know, the outer piece with a little propane torch. And then, you know, of course, break the nut loose on top, leave the nut on there, took a big brass hammer, whacked it good and hard to knock it loose. And then I was able to put a new boot on because these both split and looking bad. So let's see if we can't grease that. Here comes the good red grease. All right, we got that good, ain't we? All right, let's go to the other side. There's something else. That's a good idea. I try to encourage people to do maintenance on the RVs themselves, even if you're not mechanically inclined. You can learn. But unlike taking it to a shop, they just quickly get under there, do the greasing, get done, go on to the next job. You're under here, you're taking your time, you can look around, and sometimes you end up finding something else. It happens a lot. You know, you can check your shocks, make sure there's no leaks, check your hoses while you're under here, make sure there's no drips. Check the water pump, you know, and make sure there's no water coming from any hoses. Just give it a good eyeball, because you never know when something else is going to creep up on you. You don't want no surprises. You want to catch the stuff when you're at home. And that way you can take care of it and have a nice, uneventful trip on your next outing. Oh, I forgot to mention this. If you notice, I got my wheels turned slightly toward the right, and by doing so, it allows me to line up all my grease fittings. Because I leave the wheel straight, I can't get to that grease fitting because of this bracket. And then I can't get to the tie rod or the other end of the drag link because of the axle. So by turning your wheels just slightly to the right, you'll be able to access all your fittings at one go. Once you get under here, you won't be crawling back out and doing it again. So that's kind of a straight shot, easy to get to. I'm gonna get my grease gun on there and give it a few squirts. It's about 4 shots at it. I think that'll be good. Yeah, I see some oozing out there around the bottom. Okay, that looks good. Now we just got to get these 3 more fittings on the rear here. Oh, actually I've got 4. 1 more to do. See how I was talking about by pivoting the wheel? By pivoting the wheel, that gives that grease fitting clearance from the axle. Makes it easy to get to everything at one time. So we get these 3 more fittings and that tie rod down there, and we'll have this part all finished up, looking good. Remember how I talked about lifting the wheels off the ground, and you can see the grease is coming out the bottom part of the thrust bearing. And I don't know if it would still do that if it had all the weight on it. So that works out really good. Actually, I've seen it rotate. When I put grease in there first, I seen it bearing rotate just a little bit as it was coming through. Okay, well now we're back at behind the transmission. My next goal was to grease this universal joint. But you can notice I've greased this a little excess or too much in the past, because you can see all the greasy residue. So don't do what I did, get carried away. So what I'm going to do, I got me some brake cleaner. I'm going to spray on that with a rag and try to wipe some of it off, get it dried up. You can see it's even slung it over here. So don't go crazy with it, but that tends to happen, I guess. Something else you want to look for while you're under here, you want to make sure there's no oil leaks coming from this is the J72 auto brake. So you want to make sure there's no oil coming from it. These things can fail over time. It's rare, but it does happen. So, you know, check your rubber hose, look for any leaks. This component here, that's your ABS module. I've never had any issues with that. Hope I never do. I'm sure that wouldn't be cheap. One thing I found I didn't like, that's why you want to get under here and look around, you need to investigate, is look at this connection under here. It's got a hole lot of moisture. I mean, lots of transmission fluid, I would imagine. Very wet. So I'm gonna take a picture of that and do some investigating. I don't know if maybe there's a seal with all these connectors go through. Maybe it begins to fail. I'll take a picture of that and do some investigating. That may be a future repair job right there. You can see our catalytic converters. Those are in good shape. We got our oxygen sensors under here. There's O2 sensor on one side, O2 sensor on the other. If you ever have to replace those, you want to go back with OEM sensors. Don't just go with any aftermarket sensor. It'll give you grief. I learned that from Brassel's RV. So, all right, then as we go down here, we'll have several grease fittings to get to. What's one long drive shaft, isn't it? Because this is a 38-foot motorhome. So let me get my grease fitting on this universal joint and do a little cleanup and see what it looks like. Okay, one hand grease gun operator. Let's see how this is gonna work. Okay, I put 3 shots in it. That should be plenty. I didn't hear or see any pop and ooze out, but I figure 3 shots should be more than enough because I don't want it slinging everywhere like it has in the past. Because I try to grease it quite often whenever I do an oil change. Now, I didn't this last time because it was ice cold winter time back in about January and I skipped it. But now it's warmed up. All right, I'm gonna see if I can't clean some grease off all this stuff and clean it up, because that's our HWH jack right there. One thing about getting grease up in there, then the dirt and grit sticks to it. And the dirt and grit is not good for those plastic slides because they should stay nice and dry with that dry RV lube. Let's see if I can't shine that up just a little bit. Okay, you see I got that looking better. Got all that grease and stuff off that rail. Got that shined up a little bit. All right, let's roll down here and do some more drive shaft greasing. All right, one more thing I've done while I'm under here. I've added just a little bit of grease to that shift cable. That runs up and down there. I remember reading that in the manual somewhere to add a little grease to that cable. Keep it lubed up well. All right, like I said, when you crawl underneath your RV and look around, greasing things, doing stuff, you always find something else. And this happened years ago. I remember I was under here and you can see these little wear notches in the heater hoses that run back to the auto heater and the water heater itself. And what was happening is they was rubbing against this metal piece. But then I added some more zip ties to pull them over farther, and I think I adjusted on this. Anyway, it doesn't rub anymore. But it's stuff like that you'll find by getting under here looking around, and that'll save you some grief later. Because something like this could be a disaster. If you blow a hose, you're driving down the road. Remember, we don't have an idiot light on our Workhorse chassis. All we got is that dumb gauge that if you ain't eyeballing it all the time, you're not going to catch it. You're going to be driving around the road. This heater hose was to pop. It's going to pump out all your water. Your engine's going to overheat, and you're not going to know about it till you hear knocking or steam. Something bad has already happened. So that's why I added that engine alarm to our engine block, so that when it hits 220, an alarm goes off. So it's a little simple stuff like that can really cause you a lot of grief. So just gotta be watchful for things like that. And once again, you see the mistake I made. It's all this residue up here where the grease is slung out of the universal joints. I'm spraying that brake cleaner on there so I can dissolve it and turn around and wipe it off. So I'm trying to go a little bit easier. I just put like 2 squirts in that joint. I don't know what the magic amount is, but I don't want to stop greasing it. But even this one back here, you can see where I wiped it off last time. I'll wipe it off some more. Golly, how many? Well, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I think 5 universal joints on this puppy. Okay, we're back to the back, almost to the back here. I think I've got one more universal down there to do, but I just want to point out this slip joint. Be sure and get it took care of. Of course, like I said, you always find something else I gotta pay attention to is my muffler. So like the muffler itself is good, but the wrap that goes around it, you see this wrap out, and you see the white, that's like the insulation. So the wrap itself is beginning to fail, and you can see the insulation right there. So maybe I can get another wrap around there maybe some sheet metal, some giant hose clamps to squeeze it. I don't know, because the muffler itself, they still look good. I'm sure they're not cheap. So something to keep an eye upon. All right, so I just got to roll back to the differential. We're going to check differential oil too while we're at it. Okay, something else to point out while you're underneath your chassis is check your grounds. This is all my main grounds right here. All my solar panels, the engine battery, house batteries. This is the ground central. So while he's coming in, you can see everything's pretty good shape, because I was in here some point in time in the past and took a sander, sanded everything. I removed every connection and reconnected it, because that can really be a source of grief, electrical gremlins. You got a poor ground. People think about cleaning the connection at the battery, but they don't think about the connection at the other end where it's going to, and that's the one that really gives you trouble, because it's up underneath here, out of sight, out of mind, where all the dirt and grit is. And also, while we're under here, I'm going to throw some grease on that gear for my steps. Somehow they're still working after 18 years. I haven't just jinxed it, but it's always, there's a lot of pivot points under here that need to be lubricated to keep that thing working good. And I got me a 1/2-inch wrench. We're going to get this plug out of this differential and check its level. Another thing great about the W24 chassis, you see, I'm under here I'm on a roller, a little creeper crawler, and you can see my wheels are on the ground. And I still have plenty of clearance, so I can get in here and do what I need to do without even having it jacked up. Okay, so my Workhorse has a Dana S130. Your W22s usually have, I think, a Dana S150. And it's deceiving. The 150s are so much bigger in size. They're huge. And they hold like twice as much oil. I think a change on the Dana S130 is like 7 or 8 quarts. I got a video on that called the Forgotten Oil Change, because people never change the differential oil hardly. And I even called Dana. Dana Tech told me, he said if he had a motor home and his Dana unit like this, he would change it, like at least every 3 years. And who is it? There's a Spartan chassis, I think it is, on their big differentials. They tell you to change your oil annually, and it's not so much the oil, but it's just to get the water out of them, because you got that big giant canister, and they sweat, and the water gets in there and dilutes the oil. And I guess if an RV sits a lot, you got all those gears that's exposed to the air, because all the oil's settled down, and then you got droplets of water constantly dripping on the gears throughout the season. And they want you to get that oil out there and get it flushed and changed. So something should be done. And that thing was tight. I had to put my feet on that thing to break that thing loose. Let's just see what it looks like here. Come on, baby. A long plug, isn't it? I think it has, yeah, okay, we got oil. All right, so we're in good shape. Let me see here. Well, I'm going to make a mess, ain't I? Well, let me get 2 hands on this, because I want to pull that out. I want to check that magnet, see if I got any metal debris on it. I'll shove me a paper towel in it real quick. Well, this is a little scary. I found something I really didn't want to see at all. That sliver of metal just came out of my differential. So I'll be taking a picture of that, sending that maybe off to Dana Tech, and see what they think that's come from and what I need to do about it. It's always something. I'm about to wrap this up. Another thing you want to do is check your rotors. Make sure they don't have any cracks in them, because that can happen if you get much mountain driving. Overheat these things, they'll crack on you. And I've been there and done that in the driveway. It was a pretty good size job, but I was able to get it done myself. And so I got my drain plug back in, got that done. I got my little sliver piece of metal. There's where I wiped off the magnet, which I expect to see that little fuzz and little particles. Wasn't expecting to see that. So it's not making me happy. One last thing I'm going to do on here, I guess I'm going to throw some grease on that step, and I'll be able to get up underneath this thing. Alright, I got my step all greased up. Something else I thought of while I was under here, if you got these squeaky steps and you got a Winnebago like this, and you got the battery compartment under your steps, pretty common layout, and if you're thinking I'm going to do an upgrade, put in bigger batteries and stuff, be cautious and be careful. take the top off the step, and then let the steps come in all the way, and watch where these arms go, because these arms protrude into the battery box. So you may be thinking, I'm just stick me in some bigger batteries, but you might find out you may do that, close the steps, and have this metal bar pierce a hole in your new battery. So be mindful of that if you ever go to do a battery upgrade. Same thing over here. Let's come into contact. I got me some spare gas jugs sitting up here because I have no batteries at all in there no more. I've moved everything into the basement area. Alrighty, I'm about ready to climb out of this thing. I just thought I was almost done, so I found something else while I was under here. I noticed this wire. So those wires hanging down low and tugging and pulling. Well, this is the wire to my little magnet switch for the doorstep. And see those wires, that goes right through a little metal hole. There's no grommet or anything there. So the constant tugging and pulling that wire could cause a short. So I'm going to just put it up here like this, zip tie it, get the weight off of it. So it's little things like that that you find that you can fix yourself and save you grief down the road. Now don't that look better? It's all zip tied up. No longer got the weight tugging on it. It's those little things that matter and that add up to a successful vacation, so you don't have troubles on the road. Okay, so I'm trying to zoom in on this thing. It's a little sliver piece of metal that I didn't expect to find. Pretty scary looking, isn't it? Gotta find out what that's from. I see an oil drain in my future on my differential, so I can see if there's anything else like that could be lurking in the bottom. Well, anyhow, I guess this project is over with. That was fun. We'll get in the house and do a little research about this piece of metal. Thank you all for watching. Hope you learned something. You guys have a blessed day. See ya. Bye.